I had just lifted a spoon to taste the pot of tomato sauce. A bit of red still smeared on my fingers. I wiped my hands on the towel hanging by the stove, bent down, and opened the cupboard. To take out the ring, right next to that blue velvet box I'd been hiding for weeks, was an envelope, addressed to a lawyer. I pulled it out, opened it. The first line hit me like a punch. I want to leave him before it's too late. I froze. In that tiny kitchen, it was just me. A ring, and a letter. On one side, the love I had been building for 3 years. On the other, her decision to walk out of my life. I sank down on the cold tile floor. Rain slammed against the window, each drop like a dull blade. Steam from the pot rose up, but inside me, there was nothing but a hollow, icy space. In one hand, I held the ring box. In the other, that letter, two things side by side, like some cruel joke. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing deep, trying not to fall apart. A few minutes earlier, I thought tonight would be the best night of my life. I had pictured her smile. I had rehearsed the most important question of my life. And now, these words tore everything down. She was already planning to leave me, and this letter was only the beginning. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of rain fill the room. Maybe I should call her. Maybe I should stop everything right now. But I didn't. I put the letter back where it was, got up, wiped my hands on my apron, and kept cooking. Tonight, I needed an answer, and I would hear it from her lips, not from an envelope. I had no idea that this dinner would be our last. I'm Ethan, 34, born in a small coastal town in Oregon, the kind of place where mornings are for fishing, and by afternoon, wet boots hang on every porch. My childhood was so ordinary, there's nothing much to brag about. Dad was a carpenter, his life wrapped around pinewood and the sound of a saw. Mom ran a little sewing shop. I grew up in an old wooden house, winters spent pressed close to the fireplace, doing homework with the smell of resin on my hands. I never went to college. At 18, I left that town with nothing but an old backpack and a childish thought that I had to find a place for myself in a big city. I did every kind of job you can think of. Waiter, delivery guy, dishwasher, construction helper. Somewhere along the way, my hands turned hard and rough. After 10 years, I managed to open a small coffee shop on a corner in Seattle. It's nothing fancy, but every morning I brew the coffee myself. And for once, I feel like I belong somewhere. Most of my regulars are people from around the block. A young office girl who always orders a latte with less milk. An old man who spends hours reading his paper. Sometimes broke students paying with loose change. I know every face by heart. And then, Hannah walked in. One rainy morning, she stood under the awning, hair all tangled, hands shaking from the cold. I opened the door and said, "Come in. Let me make you a hot mocha." Hannah was 2 years older than me. She worked in advertising. She was quick and full of energy. I was slow, awkward, but after that day, she kept coming back. And then, we started dating. Our first date, a cheap diner. We split a burger and talked for 3 hours. Hannah told me about her dreams. I told her about all the times I'd failed. She looked at me and said, "You're the kind of man who never gives up, aren't you?" I smiled. I don't give up because there's nothing left for me to give up on. 3 years with her, my life slowly filled up with Hannah. She'd wait for me to close the shop on slow nights, hand me a towel when I spilled coffee. Once, she even slipped her house key into my coat pocket and said, "In case it's too late, just drop by." Those small things meant more to me than anything else. But during those same 3 years, I learned something else. Her family never really accepted me. Her mom, sharp, successful, always looked at me with cold eyes. One dinner, she put her knife down, looked straight at me and said slowly, "Hannah is still young. She deserves more than this." I said nothing. Under the table, Hannah held my hand tight. Later that night, she told me, "I love you. Not your degree, not your job, just you." But I knew. This gap between us was like a crack in glass, silent, growing. That's why I decided to propose sooner than planned. I thought once we belonged to each other, everything else would fade. I believed love was enough. But that night, I learned something I wish I hadn't. Sometimes, even loving with everything you have still isn't enough. I'd spent almost a month preparing for tonight, a night I believed would change everything. All week, I closed the cafe early just so I could clean up my small apartment. I picked out every candle myself, bought 2 new wine glasses, and cooked pasta bolognese 3 times over, just to make sure I wouldn't repeat the disaster of the first time. That time, I'd spilled a whole jar of salt into the sauce. Hannah laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes. "If you cook like this again, I'll die of thirst before I die of being full." This afternoon, as I wiped down the kitchen counter, that memory came back. I caught myself smiling, and for a moment, the weight lifted off me. While setting the table, I found a small note she once tucked into my recipe book months ago. "Don't skip dinner." The paper had turned yellow, but her handwriting was still there. I folded it, slipped it into my shirt pocket, like some kind of lucky charm. Everything was ready. A simple, warm dinner. The smell of tomato sauce filling the kitchen, soft jazz playing from an old speaker, and in the cupboard, a blue velvet ring box waiting quietly for its moment. I had pictured it all. After dinner, I'd take out the ring, kneel, and finally say the words I'd held in for 3 years. "I know we're not rich. I know her family doesn't approve. But I truly believed love would be enough." Just yesterday, I thought about proposing in the park, but I changed my mind. The best place was this kitchen, the same spot where she once leaned her head on my shoulder, waiting for the water to boil, humming an old tune. This morning, even while the cafe was packed, my mind was somewhere else. I could only see one thing, Hannah's face when she saw that ring. I imagined her eyes wide with surprise, her lips trembling into a smile, tears spilling down her cheeks. I thought that moment would be the beginning of our little family. And then, before she even arrived, I opened the cupboard. Instead of just finding the ring, I found a letter. Everything changed in a single breath. The music faded. Time seemed to stop. I stood frozen. The only thing I could hear was my own heart, slow and heavy. The sauce still bubbled on the stove. But somehow all the warmth in the room had disappeared. I don't know when she wrote it, or why she left it there. Maybe she hadn't sent it yet. Maybe she meant to hide it, and forgot. But what hurt me most wasn't the paper itself. It was what was written inside. "I can't keep living with a man who has no future." Those words, they hit me like a hammer to the head. All those years of effort. The sleepless nights, trying to build that little coffee shop. All the faith I had that I'd finally become good enough. And still, in her eyes, I was just a man with no future. I sank to the floor. Thought about calling her, demanding an answer. Thought about turning off the stove, throwing it all away, and leaving. But in the end, I stood back up. I put the letter back where it was, wiped my hands on the apron, and kept stirring the sauce as if nothing had happened. Because tonight, I need to hear it from her, not from an envelope. And I had no idea that choosing to keep cooking this dinner would change the course of my life forever. The doorbell rang at exactly 8. I wiped my hands, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Hannah was standing there, her long coat still dotted with rain, brown hair damp and clinging to her cheeks, and in those familiar eyes. There was something different tonight. "What smells so good?" she asked, smiling, trying to sound cheerful. I nodded, swallowing down the heaviness in my chest. "Pasta bolognese. This time, not too salty. Promise." A faint smile flickered across her lips. So quick, it almost wasn't there. I helped her out of her coat. Her hands were ice cold. Normally, she would throw her arms around me, hold me tight. But tonight, just a nod, and she walked quickly inside. While I finished up in the kitchen, Hannah slowly wandered around. "You changed everything in here." "Yeah. Tonight's special." Her eyes lingered on the table, 2 wine glasses shining in the candlelight. "It's beautiful," she said softly. But at the end of the sentence, her voice sounded more like a sigh. I pulled a chair out for her. Even with all the questions swirling in my head, I forced myself to stay calm. I had promised myself, tonight, I would let things play out exactly as planned. I needed to hear the truth from her. We started eating. The first bite of pasta stuck in my throat like a stone. Hannah twirled her fork, but hardly ate. And every time her phone buzzed in her pocket, she glanced at it quickly, then flipped it over, face down. "Work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Yeah, just some small stuff," she replied quickly, eyes avoiding mine. The room sank into silence. Normally, Hannah was the one who talked, and I just listened. But tonight, The silence felt like a thick wall between us. I studied her. The candlelight softened her face, but the tired circles under her eyes gave her away. "Hannah," I said quietly. "Yeah. Is something wrong?" She looked up. Our eyes met for a few seconds. I thought she was about to tell me, but then came a faint, forced smile. "No, I'm just a little tired." She picked up a small bite, but her hand trembled. The pasta slipped off her fork and fell back onto the plate. A moment later, her phone buzzed again. This time, the screen lit up long enough for me to catch a glimpse. "Tonight?" Just let him wait. A chill ran straight down my spine. Hannah hurried to turn off the phone. Her fingers stiff. Her face went pale for a split second before she forced that strained smile back on. I stayed silent, my eyes fixed on her, and she kept looking away. The air grew heavier with each minute. Even the soft clink of the knife against the plate sounded cold. I took a few more bites, just to have something to do with my hands. She barely touched her food. At one point, as I stood to pour more water, I caught her glancing toward the cupboard, the place where I had hidden the ring. It was only a fleeting look, but I knew. She was afraid of that moment coming, and she had no idea that I had already read her letter. Dinner dragged on for over an hour. Thick, suffocating. Finally, I cleared the plates, rinsed them in the sink, and then walked to the cupboard. The ring box was still there, right next to the letter. I picked up the ring, took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I turned back, walked slowly toward the table. Hannah looked up, confusion in her eyes, as if she couldn't tell what was about to happen. I set the ring box down on the table, but instead of opening it, I reached out with my other hand and placed the letter right beside it. The whole room went silent, so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. One slow beat at a time. Hannah looked at me, then down at the table. Her eyes landed on the letter. For a split second, her whole face froze. "You read it?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I sat down, my eyes never leaving hers. Every single word. The candle flickered, throwing unsteady light across her face. Hannah reached out, touched the envelope, then pulled her hand back as if it burned. I was going to put it away. I never sent it." "Why?" My voice was calm. Strangely calm. She drew a deep breath. Her hands locked together, knuckles pale. "You want to hear it all, don't you?" "All of it." Her gaze dropped. Whatever mask she'd been holding on to shattered. Her voice trembled. "I'm scared, Ethan. I love you. But these 3 years, I kept telling myself love was enough. And every time I went home, saw my mom, the life she wanted for me, I'd feel guilty, like I was dragging you into a future I couldn't even see clearly. She's never accepted you. She keeps saying, you'll only bring me pain. I fought that. I really did. But little by little, I started to doubt too. I listened. Inside, I felt hollow. So you chose to leave me. In a letter. Hannah nodded, eyes glassy. I thought, if I left first, you wouldn't have to go through all of that. I wanted to set you free. A cold wave ran straight through my chest. Silent goodbye. That's what you think is best for me. She bit down on her lip, tears spilling over. I didn't know what else to do. I'm weak, Ethan. Too weak. I was quiet for a long moment, then asked, that text earlier, who was it from? She froze. A friend? Someone my mom wants me to meet. I've said no so many times. But tonight, I don't even know if I have the strength to say no again. My throat tightened. So, you were ready to walk away from me. On the very night I planned to propose. The words hit the room like a weight, heavy enough that we could both hear our own hearts beating. Tears streamed down her face. Ethan, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to turn out like this. Why didn't you just tell me? Why wouldn't you let me carry this with you? Because I'm scared. Scared that one day we'd still love each other, but only see the burden in each other's eyes. I didn't want to wait for that moment to leave. Silence. Thick. I let out a slow breath. Do you know what I had prepared for tonight? Her eyes fell on the ring box, then back to me, breaking apart. I know. And that's exactly what made this harder. I opened the box. The silver ring gleamed under the candlelight. I thought, if I gave everything I had, we could make it. But maybe I was wrong. She pressed her hand against her mouth, holding back a sob. I don't blame you for being scared. I've been scared too. But if you choose to leave, I won't hold you. This time, say it to me. Don't let a piece of paper speak for you. Hannah covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook, her sobs muffled in her palms. After what felt like forever, she looked up. Ethan, give me one night, please. Just one night to think. I nodded. I won't ask you what you choose. I just hope, whatever it is, it's truly what you want. She stood, slipped on her coat. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. She turned back, eyes blurred with tears. I never stopped loving you. I just don't know if love is enough. The door closed behind her, and I was left alone. With a ring and a letter, I stared at the two of them lying side by side, and for the first time, I realized, sometimes, love becomes a battlefield. And that night, I understood. I was standing in it alone. The silence in that room was so thick, I could hear every tick of the clock. On the table, the ring and the letter sat there like two blades, pinned to the same spot. I didn't move. The candle burned out. Dinner went cold. And in my head, only one sentence from Hannah kept echoing. I'm not sure love is enough. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, listening to the rain whip against the window, feeling everything at once. Anger, sadness, helplessness. Angry that she hid it from me. Sad that she carried all that weight alone. And helpless because maybe she was right. Love doesn't always win. The next morning, the cafe opened like any other day. Customers came in, ordered the same drinks. But that day, every cup I made tasted like nothing. I watched couples sitting close, laughing, and something inside me cracked piece by piece. The whole day passed. Not a single text from her. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, only to find it was nothing. Until almost 10 that night, the screen finally lit up. Ethan, can I come over? I typed 3 words back. I'm still here. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Hannah walked in, same long coat, but her face was thinner, worn out. She stood at the doorway for a few seconds, then let out a slow breath. We need to talk, she said softly. Just let me say everything first. I only nodded. She took off her scarf, laid it on a chair. Her hands clasped so tightly, her fingers turned white. Ethan, I love you, but my mom doesn't believe you can give me a stable future. I've tried to prove her wrong, but the harder I try, the more she pushes. Last night, seeing you prepare everything, I realized I've dragged you into a fight you don't deserve. She paused, took a deep breath. I don't want to leave you, but I don't know if I have the strength to keep walking with all of this pressure. I looked at her and said slowly, if we walk together, it's not a fight. It's building a road. She bit her lip, eyes wet. Are you sure? Are you sure you won't feel crushed when my mom cuts you down day after day? When everyone around me says I deserve a different life? I was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm not afraid of them. I'm only afraid that one day you'll start believing them too. Her eyes closed, and the tears fell. Ethan, after I left last night, I went to see that man. I stood outside his door for an hour, but I couldn't go in. I just wanted to run away from everything. And when I turned back, I didn't even know what I was looking for anymore. Those words cut slow and deep. What do you want now? I asked, my voice raw. I need time. Not a few days, maybe months. I need to know if I can stand next to you without shaking. The room went silent again. Outside, the rain hit the roof hard. So, you want us to pause? I asked. She nodded, tears spilling. I know it's cruel, but I don't want to love you out of panic. I turned away, drawing in a deep breath. I had prepared myself for this answer, but hearing it from her lips drained everything out of me. I don't know what to say, I whispered. I won't stop you. But a pause. For you, does that mean a step to come back? Or a step to walk away? Ethan. I don't know yet, she said, barely audible. A faint smile crossed my lips, empty. I understand. I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. My hand on the handle felt like letting go of everything left. I understand, but I can't love for the both of us. She walked out without a word. This time, there were no promises, only the sound of the door closing. Dry, heavy, like a full stop. After the door closed, the whole room felt drained of sound. I leaned against it for a long time, until I realized my hand was still gripping the cold handle. I turned back to the table. The ring was still there. I picked it up, then set it back down. For the first time, I didn't know what to do. The days after that moved painfully slow. Open the cafe in the morning. Close it at night. Come home to an empty apartment. Customers kept coming, talking, laughing, but it was like I heard them all through a thick pane of glass. The phone stayed silent. Not a single message. I woke up earlier, worked longer, just so I wouldn't think. I cleaned, painted over peeling spots, rearranged the kitchen. The more I fixed, the bigger the apartment felt. A home without Hannah. Some nights, I'd play soft music and sit in the kitchen, staring at the chair where she used to sit. And I'd wonder, does she think about me? Or has this time apart already been long enough for her to start walking somewhere else? A week, then 2, almost a month. One evening, while wiping the tables outside, I heard a laugh I thought I'd know anywhere. My heart stopped. I turned, only to see a couple I didn't know. That moment, it felt like my chest fell straight to the floor. Another night, as I locked up the shop, I saw her across the street. Hannah, waiting for the bus. Thinner, hair a mess, face pale. She saw me too. Our eyes met for a brief second. No wave, no smile, just a quiet look before we both turned away. That night, I went home and sat on the kitchen floor. I wanted to run to her, call her name, but in my head, I heard her voice from that night. I need time. Not just a few days. Maybe the only thing I could do was stay still. In the days after, I changed the cafe, opened earlier, closed later. I started hosting small acoustic nights. The sound of a guitar, a voice. It made rainy evenings feel a little less empty. One weekend night, while cleaning up, I found a folded note in the drawer behind the counter. Hannah's handwriting, left there long ago. If one day you ever feel tired, make yourself a cup of coffee like the very first time we met. Maybe by then, I'll still be sitting somewhere close to you. I folded it back. That night, I made myself a cup, sat in the corner, closed my eyes. When I opened them, the chair next to me was still empty. Sometimes I ask myself, to love someone, does it also mean to let them go, if that's what it takes for them to find themselves? That question has stayed with me through every night. Then, one late afternoon at the end of the month, the sky turned dark. Wind howled through the streets. The door to the cafe swung open. Hannah was standing there, her thin coat dotted with rain. But her eyes, they weren't the same as the night she left. No panic this time, only the look of someone who had walked through a storm. She stepped inside, didn't rush to speak, only the sound of wind outside, and the faint smell of coffee still hanging in the air. We looked at each other. Time stood still. Could you close the shop for a bit? Her voice soft, shaky. I nodded, hung up the close sign, locked the door. When I turned back, Hannah was standing by the window, both hands clenched tight. Ethan. Her voice cracked. It took me longer than I thought, but I finally found my answer. I didn't say a word, only the wind beating against the glass. I'll tell you everything, but before I do you still have the patience to listen? I looked straight at her. Since that night, I've been waiting only for this. Hannah bit her lip, tears rolling down. Then, listen to me. Hannah drew in a long breath, as if gathering every bit of courage she had left. For the past month, she began, her voice trembling but clear. Not a day has gone by that I didn't think about that night. When I walked out of here, I thought my decision was made. But standing at his door, I realized I wasn't looking for him. I was just trying to run away from myself. And the moment I turned around, I finally understood. No one can save me but me. Her eyes lifted, shimmering under the warm light of the cafe. I sat on that porch for an hour, unable to move. Then I went home, and for weeks after, I forced myself to face what I'd been avoiding. That deep down, I never believed I deserved to be happy. I stayed silent. Every word she spoke landed slow and heavy, like knocks on my chest. I started seeing a therapist, she went on, not so someone could teach me how to love, but so, for the first time, I could say everything out loud. The fear, the shame, the wounds from my family. And I realized, all this time, it was me. I was the one doubting myself, and doubting us. Her voice softened. If that night I had taken the ring, I probably would have said yes, shaking. And one day, when fear won, I would have ruined everything myself. I didn't want to love you that way. I leaned back in my chair, fingers interlocked. At last, I understood why everything fell apart that night. But I still didn't know why she came back today. Hannah, I asked quietly, And now, for the first time in months, she met my eyes without looking away. Now, I want to start over, not from zero, but from myself. I've wasted too much time being afraid. I want to spend what's left being brave. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is the letter I meant to leave behind that night. I rewrote it. But this time, I want to read it with my own voice, not let a piece of paper speak for me. I looked at the envelope in her hands. Part of me wanted to refuse, but another part needed to hear everything, face to face. Read it, I said. She opened the envelope, unfolded a wrinkled sheet. Her hands trembled so much the paper shook. Her voice came out in broken pieces. Ethan, that night was supposed to be a happy night, but I came with a heart full of panic. I thought I was strong enough to ignore all the judgment, to love you with everything I had. But the more I loved, the more I was afraid of hurting you. In my first letter, I planned to leave the ring on the table, but I kept it with me all this month. Every day, I opened the box, looked at it, and asked myself, would I ever be brave enough to come back? Today, I came back, not because I'm no longer afraid, but because I want to learn how to love without running. If you still want me, please give me a chance to begin again. This time, I won't let fear decide for me. She folded the letter, her hands gripping so hard her knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down, but in her eyes, there was more strength than I'd ever seen. I stayed silent. In my head, everything spun. The interrupted proposal, the long, empty weeks, and her eyes tonight. It all came down to a single question. Do I still have enough faith to take one more step? I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty. The glow of the streetlight spilled across the wet pavement. My fingers touched the cold frame. My breath slowed. Behind me, Hannah stood still, her hands trembling. I stood by the window, looking out. The empty street stretched like a long mirror, streaked with scattered patches of yellow light. It took me a long while before I turned back. Hannah, I said slowly, my voice low, do you know how long this past month has felt to me? She stayed silent, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Every morning I opened the cafe. Every night I locked it up. I kept thinking, if that night you had told me everything you just told me now, things might have been different. But then, I realized, there are some roads no one can walk for you. You had to take that circle on your own to finally find yourself. I took slow steps toward her. I'm not angry that you left. I'm just afraid, if I open my heart again, will there come a day when that same fear pulls you away from me all over again? Hannah looked straight at me, her eyes steady in a way I hadn't seen before. I can't promise I'll never be afraid, she said. But I promise I won't run. If I'm scared, I'll tell you. If I'm tired, I'll lean on you. This time, I'm choosing to stay. Her words stopped me cold. Something inside my chest felt like a knot finally loosening. Hannah drew a deep breath, then lowered her head. And if you don't want that, I'll understand. She let go of the table, started to turn away. Wait, I said, my voice cutting through that moment. I opened the drawer behind the counter and took out the ring box. My fingers hesitated before I lifted the lid. I looked at the ring. Her eyes filled with tears. I placed the ring on the table, between us. I didn't give this to you that night. And tonight, I'm not ready to give it to you either. But I want to leave it here, for both of us to look at, until the day we're truly sure. Hannah pressed her lips together and nodded. A single tear dropped onto the table, landing right next to the ring. I sat down across from her. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but if you really want to start over, I'll say yes. Not because I've forgotten everything, but because the woman sitting in front of me tonight is not the same Hannah I saw a month ago. She broke down, but this time, not shattered. The sound of her crying was lighter, as if someone had finally set a heavy burden down. She reached for my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I let my hand rest in hers. For a long while, neither of us spoke, only the faint sound of wind outside the window, and our heartbeats slowly settling. Tomorrow, I said, come to the cafe with me. Not for anyone to see, just so you remember this place. We'll always have a seat for you. Through tears, Hannah smiled. I'll come. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. From tomorrow, we'll start again. One step at a time. No rush, no pressure. As long as every step is real, she nodded. Outside, a thin rain began to fall, blurring the glass. Inside, two shadows sat side by side, hands clasped, and the ring stayed on the table between us. Not as an ending, but as a promise. That night, I didn't sleep. I cleaned the cafe, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. For the first time in weeks, there was a small patch of light inside me. Something had been lit again. Hope. I don't know what the future holds, but at least tonight, we sat down and said it all. And sometimes, courage begins on a quiet night like this. The next morning, when I opened the cafe, Hannah was already waiting outside. In her hands were 2 cups of hot coffee from the corner shop. She handed me one with a soft smile. "Today, let me buy you coffee. Let's start from here." There was nothing more to say. We just cleaned the cafe together. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt heavy. I took a sip of the hot coffee and realized something. What has grown cold, if you're patient enough to warm it again, can still be fragrant. News of Hannah's return didn't stay hidden for long. That afternoon, one of the older regulars, who had seen everything, walked over, looked at us, and asked straight out, "She's back, huh?" I smiled and answered before Hannah could. "Yes, she's back. And this time, I hope things will be different." The woman studied Hannah for a few seconds, then nodded. I noticed Hannah kept smiling, but her hand pulled back slightly. As we went back behind the counter, I leaned close and whispered, "Tomorrow, there'll be more looks like that. Are you ready?" Hannah drew a slow breath. If I ran because of them before, then today I stay because of me. A few days later, Hannah decided to visit her mother. Just before walking out the door, she said, "Come with me. This time, I'm not running anymore." Her mother's small house was quiet, the faint smell of tea hanging in the air. She sat in the living room, her eyes sharp as soon as she saw us. "You brought him here again," she said coldly. Hannah touched my hand for just a moment, then let go and stepped forward. "Yes, I brought him here, because this time, I'm not leaving." Her mother frowned. "So you didn't learn anything from last time?" "I learned a lot, Mom," Hannah answered calmly. "I learned what it was that made me afraid. And today, I came to tell you, one last time, I will decide my own life." Her mother narrowed her eyes. "You think love alone will be enough?" Hannah shook her head, her voice firm. "No, love isn't enough. That's why I had to change myself. I don't expect you to agree right away, but this time, I choose him. Not to fight you, but to stand with myself." For a split second, something flickered in her mother's eyes. Then she turned away. "Do what you want. Just don't come back crying to me again." Hannah bowed her head. "I promise this time will be different." The days after that, Hannah slowly became part of the cafe again. She helped me at the counter, chatted with customers, and sometimes planned little acoustic nights. One afternoon, I overheard a group of young customers whispering, "Isn't that the girl who left him? She'll leave again. Just wait." I glanced at Hannah. She set the tray down and went right on working, calm. That night, after closing, I asked her, "You heard all of that. Doesn't it bother you?" She smiled. "Of course it does. But if I let a few words drag me back into who I used to be, then everything I've been working for means nothing." Her words left me silent for a long time. At the end of the day, when the cafe was quiet, we sat on the back steps, looking out at the narrow alley. The smell of coffee drifted out from inside. Resting her chin on her hand, Hannah said slowly, "You know, a cup of coffee that's gone cold seems like something you should throw away. But if you warm it up again, the flavor comes back. I want to be like that." I turned to her and nodded. "I get it. And I'm learning to warm up my trust again, too." She smiled softly. "Then let's learn together." Outside, the alley was quiet. Inside, the warm scent of coffee filled the air, like the calm that comes after a long rain. One busy weekend afternoon, the cafe was packed. The door swung open, and a man's voice cut through. "I just want to talk." The room froze. Standing in the doorway was Mark, the man Hannah went to that night. She walked away from me. I looked at Hannah. Her face went pale, but this time, she didn't look away. She placed a hand on the counter, drew in a long, steady breath, as if finding her balance. I saw her shoulders tremble. Then slowly, her breathing steadied. She stepped out from behind the counter, her voice calm. "Mark, let's step outside." "Not here." I started to follow, but she turned back, eyes firm. "Do you trust me?" I nodded. "I trust you." Outside, wind swept down the street. From inside, I watched through the foggy glass. Hannah stood across from Mark, just a few feet apart. Her shoulders straight. Not once did she look back. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Mark said quietly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. That night, I was wrong to leave you sitting outside. I don't want to ruin your life." Hannah shook her head, her voice steady. "It wasn't your fault. It was mine. Thinking that running to you would somehow save me from fear. But I've learned now. No one can save me but myself." Mark was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'm glad to see you're okay." "Yeah, I am, and I hope you are too." With that, Hannah turned and walked back inside. The entire cafe stayed silent as she opened the door again. She walked straight to the counter, lighter now, as if a heavy stone had been set down. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, her eyes calm. "I am, because for the first time, I didn't run." That night, after the cafe emptied out, I said while wiping a table, "Today I almost went out there. But then I thought, if I really trust you, I have to let you stand on your own." Hannah turned to me with a smile. "I've waited a long time to hear that." She sat down beside me. "The night I left, I thought I needed someone else to prove my worth. But what I really needed was to face myself. And today, when Mark showed up, I realized I'm not the same anymore." The days after that grew quieter. No one mentioned the past. Each day became a small step, opening the cafe together, listening to each other, and learning to accept the silence between us. One evening, Hannah asked, "Do you ever get scared? Scared that one day I'll hurt you again?" I answered honestly, "I do. But that fear also reminds me to hold on to what we have now." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm scared too. But this time, I won't run." A week later, on the cafe's 1-year anniversary, Hannah brought out the ring box and placed it on the table. "I want to give this back to you. Not because I'm saying no, but because I think, when we're truly ready, I want you to be the one to give it again." I looked at the ring and nodded. "All right. It'll be here, waiting for that day." The late afternoon light spilled across her hand, soft as an unspoken promise. I don't know what the future holds, but from the moment Hannah stepped outside that day to face Mark, everything changed. It was no longer about an apology. It became a journey. Two people learning how to stand steady, side by side. Night fell, and the cafe glowed warm from the inside, casting a long beam of light out into the street. On that familiar road, that light felt like something new. Quiet, but enough to tell anyone passing by, "It's here to stay." A month after that afternoon when Mark showed up, my little cafe entered its first winter. These days, the wind slips through every crack in the wood, bringing with it a sharp cold. I've grown to like that moment at the end of the day, pulling the curtains down, turning on the warm yellow lights, and watching through the window as snow drifts across an empty street. Hannah usually sits at the table by the wall, sorting through the books. I wipe down the counter. We don't talk much, but the silence now isn't distance anymore. It's a quiet kind of peace. Sometimes I still remember the night she walked away. That pain has never disappeared, but now it feels more like a healed scar. I can still feel it if I touch it, but it doesn't bleed anymore. One evening, Hannah asked, "Do you ever wish none of it had happened?" I thought for a moment before answering, if the past had been different, maybe we wouldn't have learned how to really listen to each other like we do now. Hannah smiled. This time, her smile wasn't hiding anything, and I realized, in love, holding on tighter doesn't always mean you can keep someone. Sometimes, the only thing you can do is stand still and let them find their way back. Hannah came back, not because I was perfect, but because she had learned to stand on her own. And I stayed, not to hold her back, but to walk beside her. That night, the snow fell heavier than usual. The cafe was quiet, just the two of us. Hannah put on her coat and stepped out to the porch. I followed. The street outside was covered in white. Hannah held out her hand, catching flakes that melted in her palm. "You know," she said, "I used to think things would last forever, but I forgot that snow melts, coffee cools, and people change." She turned to me, her eyes clear under the soft yellow light. "Maybe what matters isn't keeping the snow from melting, but standing there together while it's still falling." I stayed quiet and reached for her hand. This time, her hand was cold, but no longer trembling. We stood there, on an empty street, watching the snow come down. No rings, no promises, just two people choosing to stay. In this moment, for a brief second, I thought of the night she left, also on a night this cold. But tonight, we simply stood side by side. Life doesn't come with a clear ending. The future, no one knows. But there's one thing I believe. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on tight. It's about having the patience to wait. And if the day comes when they return, you learn to start over, from the smallest things. That night, through the window, the cafe's warm glow spilled out onto the white street. In the freezing wind, that little light seemed small. But it stayed, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly at peace.